We're going to start this deep dive not in some stuffy briefing room, but way up high. Imagine this, 27,000 feet above France, April 8th, 1943. Cold, thin air.
Yeah, a crystal clear, but pretty tense day up there. Oberleutnant Ralph Harrimuchen, he's with JG-26, one of the Luftwaffe's best fighter units. He's on patrol. And he sees these strange shapes climbing up towards him, really bulky looking things.
And these were the newcomers, right? The Republic P-47 Thunderbolt making its combat debut.
That's them. And Harrimuchen, he's a veteran ace. He doesn't miss a beat. He keys his radio to his wingman and says, and this is a direct quote, "The armies have sent us flying milk bottles."
Flying milk bottles. You can just hear the laughter crackling over the German radio net.
Absolutely. I mean, they're flying these sleek Focke-Wulf 190s, agile Messerschmitt 109s, and then this 7-ton American thing comes lumbering. It looked, well, kind of comical, like a dinosaur trying to fly.
Exactly. But that's the incredible twist in this story, isn't it? What Harrimuchen and, frankly, the entire Luftwaffe just couldn't grasp in that moment was that this ridiculous milk bottle was going to be the very thing that systematically ripped their fighter arm apart within about 18 months.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive, to unpack that paradox. How did this machine, laughed at initially, turn into this instrument of absolute terror? It's a story, maybe more than any other from the air war, about how sheer industrial power, American industrial logic, just steamrolled tactical brilliance.
And a huge part of that industrial logic was bolted right into the wings. 8 synchronized .50 caliber Browning machine guns. Think about that firepower.
It's staggering. A combined rate of fire around 6,000 rounds per minute. That's not just shooting. It's like unleashing an avalanche of steel.
So where did this dinosaur even come from? Let's rewind a bit.
Okay, so June 1940, Republic Aviation's chief designer, Alexander Kartveli, gets these urgent requirements. High altitude interceptor, needs to be tough, needs to perform way up high.
And he knew it wasn't going to be dainty.
Not at all. He apparently told his team, it will be a dinosaur, but it'll be a dinosaur with good proportions. Yeah. And he wasn't kidding. The result, the XP-47B prototype, it weighed nearly 10,000 pounds empty.
Which was, what, significantly heavier than what came before?
Yeah, about 65% heavier than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. It was just a monster of a plane for its time.
But that size wasn't just for show, right? It was built around something specific.
Exactly. It was designed around that massive engine, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. Huge radial engine, putting out around 2,000 horsepower. But the real trick was keeping that power up high.
Which required that famous turbo supercharger system.
Right, a really complex system. Huge ducts running all the way back through the fuselage. That's what gave the P-47 that distinctive profile, that bulge underneath. People called it a pregnant appearance.
A bit unflattering, maybe, but crucial.
Absolutely crucial, because that turbo allowed the engine to maintain its full power way up high, like 27,000 feet, sometimes even higher. German fighters used mechanical superchargers, and they started losing breath, getting sluggish, above maybe 24,000 feet.
So while the Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs were struggling for air,
the Thunderbolt was just hitting its stride. It basically owned the stratosphere early on.
Okay, so it had this high altitude potential, but getting American pilots ready to fly this thing, that wasn't exactly smooth sailing either, was it?
Oh, far from it. That initial training phase, say September 42 to January 43, it was incredibly dangerous. They actually called it the juggernaut in training.
Really? Why so bad?
Well, Major Hubert Zena's fighter group, for instance, lost 18 pilots and 41 of these planes just to training accidents. That was actually a higher loss rate initially than the Germans would inflict on them in the first few months of combat.
Wow. What was causing the accidents? Just the size and power?
Pretty much. The weight made it tricky on the ground, prone to ground loops on landing. The sheer power and the huge propeller caused intense torque roll on takeoff. You really had to manage it. But the biggest killer, technically, was discovering compressibility.
Compressibility. Explain that a bit. It's where the air basically piles up.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. At really high speeds, say over 450 miles per hour in a dive, the air flowing over those thick wings and especially the control surfaces, it becomes almost like treacle. It piles up faster than the pilot's controls can move the surfaces through it.
So the controls just freeze up?
Effectively, yes. They'd become incredibly heavy, sometimes impossible to move. Pilots pulling out of high-speed dives found they just couldn't pull the nose up. They flew straight into the ground. It was a terrifying learning curve.
I remember reading a quote from Lieutenant Robert Johnson, who became a top ace later, about his first flight.
Oh yeah, Johnson's quote is classic. He said, "It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. You didn't fly it, you aimed it." That really captures the feeling. It demanded a whole new way of thinking about flying a fighter.
So this beast finally gets into combat in spring 43. And those initial German reactions, the milk bottle jokes, they seemed kind of justified at first.
They absolutely did. The Germans quickly confirmed what they suspected. The P-47, especially at medium altitudes where most early fights happened, it just couldn't turn or climb with their fuel to 190s. It was too heavy, too slow to accelerate in those conditions.
So the German pilots had a clear tactic.
Immediately. Joseph Pips Priller, the commander of JG-26, he basically summed it up. He reported back, very pleased, that the new American fighter was, and I quote, meat for the slaughter. It flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, and climbs like a pregnant cow. He even mentioned his pilots were calling them Indiana fat targets.
Ouch. And the kill ratios reflected that early on.
They did. In that first month or so, the American groups lost something like 14 Thunderbolts for only 3 confirmed German kills. Things look grim. The RAF, our allies, were seriously suggesting the Americans should just ditch the P-47 and build Spitfires under license instead.
But this is where the narrative starts to flip, isn't it? Because the planes that did make it back, they told a different story.
Exactly. While the Germans were racking up kills, the P-47s that survived those encounters were coming home with damage that it defied belief. It completely baffled the Germans based on their experience.
What made them so tough?
2 main things initially. First, the sheer structural strength. It was just built incredibly solid. Second, and maybe more importantly, that big radial engine.
Ah, the air-cooled radial versus the liquid-cooled engines in the German fighters and the Spitfire.
Precisely. If a Messerschmitt or a Spitfire took a hit to its cooling system, its glycol lines or radiator, the engine would seize up almost instantly. Game over. The P-47's R-2800 was air-cooled. It didn't have those vulnerable liquid systems. It could take incredible damage, especially head-on, lose cylinders, get shot to pieces, and often keep running long enough to get the pilot home.
There are some incredible stories about that. I think one came back with, was it cannon holes and machine gun hits?
Yeah, there's a documented case from May 4th, 1943. One P-47 returned with 21 holes from 20-millimeter cannons and over 100 machine gun strikes. Damage like that would have literally vaporized a BF-109 or an FW-190.
And then there's the story, the one that really cemented this reputation for toughness. Lieutenant Johnson again, right?
Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson,
Yeah.
June 26, 1943. This encounter became legendary, almost mythical. He got jumped by a group of Finn W-90s led by Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, brother of the famous Adolf Galland.
And they basically shot his plane to pieces around him.
Completely shredded it. Reports say he took at least 21 hits from 20-millimeter cannon shells alone. His canopy was shattered, there was a fire in the cockpit, hydraulic fluid everywhere. A shell explosion even jammed the canopy shut, trapping him inside this burning, vibrating wreck.
But it kept flying.
Incredibly, yes.
Yeah.
Crippled, smoking, barely controllable, but it kept hitting towards England. And then comes a really unbelievable part.
Another German pilot finds him.
Yeah, an unknown Self-190 pilot spots this wreck limping over the channel and moves in for the kill. He apparently closed right in and just emptied everything he had into Johnson's P-47. 4 20-millimeter cannons, 2 13-millimeter machine guns, point-blank range.
Just unloading into a plane that should already be falling apart.
Right. Then, according to Johnson's account, the German pilot pulls up alongside. He looks over into the shattered cockpit, sees Johnson still flying this abomination. The German pilot, completely out of ammo, just stares in disbelief. Then he apparently gives Johnson this sort of informal, weary salute and just peels away.
Speechless. What happens to Johnson?
He somehow managed to land that P-47 back in England. They counted over 200 bullet and shell holes in the airframe later. The survival of that single aircraft. It sent genuine shockwaves through both sides. German intelligence initially dismissed their own pilots' claims about its toughness as exaggeration. But when multiple pilots reported seeing things like this, they had to start believing it.
So this realization, okay, this thing is incredibly tough, even if it can't dogfight, that must have forced a change in tactic.
Absolutely. They couldn't win turning, so they had to stop trying. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, he dropped the Zenith spelling later of the 56th Fighter Group. He was crucial here. He basically laid down the law. Don't turn with them. Use your weight, use your power, use your guns.
Which led to the classic American tactic.
Boom and zoom. It was tailor-made for the Thunderbolt's strengths. You use that powerful engine and turbocharger to climb high, really high, like 30,000 feet or more. Up there, the P-47 was performing well, and the German fighters were struggling.
Trading altitude for speed.
Exactly. You use the P-47's immense weight, remember. It's a heavy plane to build up incredible speed in a dive. We're talking speeds approaching, sometimes exceeding 550 miles per hour. German fighters simply couldn't match that dive speed.
And at that speed, hitting them becomes almost impossible for the defender.
Very difficult. Deflection shooting against something closing that fast is incredibly hard. But the real terror wasn't just the dive. It was what happened when the P-47 reached the target. That's where those 8 guns came in.
A wall of lead. Let's talk about that convergence zone.
Okay, so most fighters had maybe a couple of cannons, a few machine guns. The P-47 was about volume. Those 8.50 caliber Brownings were synchronized. That means the pilots could set them so all 8 streams of bullets would cross or converge at a specific distance, usually around 300 yards out.
So at that
300-yard point, you had this cone of fire collapsing into a zone maybe 6 feet across. And into that small zone, you were pumping roughly 100 half-inch slugs every single second.
My God, it's like hitting something with a giant shotgun blast, but continuously.
German pilots literally described it as flying into a wall of lead. There was just no surviving it. We saw the horrific effect during the Regensburg raid, August 17, 1943. The P-47s went after the German twin-engine destroyer aircraft, the Me-110s.
Wow.
Major David Schilling, one of the P-47 pilots, targeted an Me-110. A surviving German gunner from another aircraft, Heinrich Roth, described watching the plane ahead of him just disintegrate. His words were something like, "The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart, shredded into metal confetti in 2 seconds."
Shredded into metal confetti, that paints a picture. And this was happening at altitudes where the Germans were already at a disadvantage.
Right. That altitude dominance was key. Take the case of Hans Philipp, a huge German ace, 206 victories. October 8, 1943. He's up around 28,000 feet in his Fu-190. He described his plane as feeling sluggish and unresponsive up there.
And then the Thunderbolts arrived.
Diving from above, from maybe 32,000 feet, Philipp never had a chance. He was shot down and killed. And guess who was credited with the kill?
Let me guess. Lieutenant Robert Johnson.
The very same. Fully recovered from being shot up. And now putting the boom and zoom tactic he learned to survive into lethal practice. Philipp's death really sent a chill through the Luftwaffe. If one of their very best aces wasn't safe at altitude, who was?
So the P-47 is proving tough. It has the altitude, it has the firepower, and now the right tactics. Was there anything left to improve?
There was one more big jump, really solidified its performance across the board. That came in early 1944 with the P-47D-22 variant. The key upgrade was a new propeller.
A propeller made that much difference.
This one did. It was a huge 13-foot diameter paddle blade propeller, much wider blades, more surface area. The immediate effect was a dramatic improvement in climb rate. Suddenly, the P-47 could climb much better, maybe up to 3,000 feet per minute.
So it fixed its main remaining weakness compared to the German fighters.
Pretty much. It made it a serious threat, not just way up high, but at medium and lower altitudes too. And that big prop also changed how the plane sounded.
Ah, the Donnerschlag.
The thunderclap. German ground troops started recognizing approaching P-47s just by the sound. The deep, menacing rumble the massive prop tips made as they went supersonic in a dive. It became the sound of impending doom for them.
And around this time, its role started to shift too, right? As the P-51 Mustang came online for long-range escort.
Exactly. The Mustang, with its incredible range, took over the primary bomber escort duties deeper into Germany. The Thunderbolt, with its ruggedness and now proven versatility, increasingly shifted to low-level ground attack. It became a multi-role monster.
Flying artillery, basically.
Absolutely. They could carry a serious punch. Up to 1,000 pounds of bombs, plus 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, or HVARs. That's an incredible amount of ordnance for a fighter platform back then. A German Panzer Grenadier Colonel, Hans von Luck, famously described them as flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers.
Must have terrified the German ground forces.
Completely changed the ground war on the Western Front. P-47s strafing and bombing columns, hitting tanks, gun positions. They could soak up incredible amounts of flak because of that rugged airframe and radial engine, deliver their payload accurately, and still get home. It forced the Wehrmacht to basically only move at night in many areas. The daytime skies belonged to the Thunderbolts.
This all comes back to that industrial logic you mentioned at the start. The sheer scale of American production and resources.
And nothing illustrates that horrifying reality for the Germans better than Operation Bodenplatte, January 1st, 1945. This was the Luftwaffe's last desperate gamble, a surprise attack on Allied airfields.
And they did achieve surprise, right? Destroyed a lot of planes on the ground.
They did. At one major USAF airfield, Y-29 Ash in Belgium, they caught the 366th Fighter Group on the ground during takeoff and destroyed 22 P-47s in minutes. It was a tactical success for the Germans.
But the American reaction?
There's a legendary story. A captured German pilot was apparently at the command post, maybe taunting the American commander, Major George Brooking, about the burning P-47s, saying something about winning back air superiority.
And Brooking's reply?
Brooking just looked at him and reportedly said, "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?"
Wow. That just cuts right to the heart of it.
It sums up the entire war dynamic by that point. The U.S. replaced those destroyed P-27s within days, maybe a week. The Germans, in that one raid, lost 213 pilots. Many of them were irreplaceable instructors, experienced leaders pulled back to the front lines out of desperation. Those losses were permanent. Tactical victory, strategic catastrophe.
The numbers are just mind-boggling when you look at the overall picture.
They really are. Republic Aviation churned out 15,683 P-47s during the war. At peak production, they were building one every hour. And then there's a pilot training gap.
Huge difference there too, right?
Massive. The U.S. was graduating something like 30,000 pilots a year by the later war years. And each American pilot going into combat typically had a minimum of 400 hours of flight time, sometimes more.
Compared to the Luftwaffe.
By 1944, 1945, German pilots were often being thrown into combat with less than 100 hours total flight time, sometimes much less. It wasn't just better planes in greater numbers. It was vastly more trained pilots flying them. An avalanche, like you said earlier, of both zeal and skill.
Let's bring it full circle back to Joseph Priller, the guy who called them pregnant cows and meat for the slaughter back in '43. Did his opinion change?
Drastically. By March 1945, Priller wrote a confidential assessment of the air situation. His view on the Thunderbolt, it was deemed so pessimistic, so potentially damaging to morale, that the Nazi regime refused to publish it.
What did he say?
He stated flatly, "The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built." And he directly linked it to the industrial might behind it, saying, "Unlimited American production. Courage without resources is just delayed defeat." The laughter was long gone, replaced by the grim reality of total defeat.
You can see that shift clearly in the official German intelligence reports, too.
It's stark. April 1943. P-47 considered a minimal threat. Fast forward to March 1945, the assessment is basically unsurvivable in direct engagement. Don't even try to fight it head on.
And the final numbers bear that out. The P-47 achieved a pretty impressive kill ratio in air combat, didn't it, despite its perceived limitations?
It did. Overall, considering all theaters, it's credited with a 4.6 to 1 kill ratio against enemy aircraft in the air. Not bad for a flying milk bottle.
Adolf Galland, the famous German general of fighters, he flew a captured P-47 after the war. What was his take?
Galland really summed up the initial German misunderstanding. He said something like, "We saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. We were the ones who didn't understand. They built an American one designed around production, firepower, and survivability." He got it. They'd prioritize the things that actually win industrial wars.
It really was overbuilt, wasn't it? That ruggedness wasn't an accident.
Not at all. For instance, the wing spars, the main structural beams in the wings, were designed to withstand loads 3 times the maximum loaded weight of the aircraft. It was engineered to take punishment and keep going. Combine that with the overwhelming firepower. It just ground the opposition down. It didn't always win with finesse. It won through brute force, resilience, and numbers.
So thinking about the P-47's legacy, for years it kind of lived in the shadow of the P-51 Mustang, the sleek, long-range thoroughbred.
Right, the Mustang often gets the glory, and it was a phenomenal, crucial aircraft, especially for the long-range escort mission. But maybe we've underestimated the P-47's own unique brand of genius.
You mean the design philosophy itself?
Exactly. The P-47, the dinosaur, wasn't necessarily about being the most elegant or the most agile. It represented a different kind of engineering philosophy, one focused on overwhelming durability, massive firepower, and the ability to be produced and sustained in crushing numbers.
A philosophy built for total war.
Precisely. It teaches us that sometimes in high-stakes competition, whether it's warfare or maybe even other fields, the winning solution isn't always the most beautiful or the most technically complex. Sometimes it's the one that's just incredibly tough to break and can deliver overwhelming resources relentlessly.
They built a flying anvil that hit like a sledgehammer, backed by an entire continent's industrial might. The laughter definitely died. The thunder had spoken. It makes you think, when you look at complex systems today, what's the priority? Elegance or the sheer ability to endure and deliver?
A very provocative thought to end on. Was it designed to look good, or was it designed to win? The P-47 definitely knew its answer.